Hello, and welcome to Book Solid, New Canaan Library's podcast for adventurous readers across all genres. This is our first episode of Season 7, and we will be discussing Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. I'm your host, Kathleen, a collections librarian.
And I'm your host, James, a reference and instruction librarian.
And you may have noticed that it's just the two of us. Unfortunately, Kat is unable to join us for this season of the podcast, so we are back to our Season 4 lineup.
So before we get started, I'm going to give a quick non-spoiler plot summary of the book before we start our discussion. Located close to Antarctica, populated by penguins, seabirds, seals, and the most common visitors being passing whales, not people. The remoteness and abundance of interesting wildlife made this a perfect location for a seed vault and a research base, or so their builders thought. Now, in the face of a changing climate that brings ever stronger storms and fiercer floods, the Shearwater Island seed vault is in danger of being flooded. The researchers are gone, and the task of preserving the precious seeds inside falls to Dominic Salt and his 3 children, the island's caretakers. While the whole family is feeling the pressure and effects of extreme isolation, each of the Salts is also struggling with their own personal issues. Dominic is grief-stricken over the loss of his wife and has withdrawn into himself as he attempts to hold his family together. 18-year-old Raph is filled with anger and trying to recover from a broken heart. 17-year-old Fen spends more time with the seals than her own family and has been sleeping alone in a boathouse instead of at the family's lighthouse. And 9-year-old Orly is struggling to deal with the loss of the natural world that he has come to love. Into all of this, something unexpected washes up onto Shearwater Shore. A woman named Rowan, who made the journey here under mysterious circumstances and for unclear reasons. Though initially suspicious of Rowan, the Salts warm to her and begin to treat her more as a member of the family than as a mystery to be solved. But Rowan isn't the only mystery on the island, as she reveals while she's pursuing her own clandestine investigation and realizes how evasive the Salts are being, at which point she also finds sabotaged radios and a freshly dug grave. Amid rising tensions and hidden secrets, the ocean comes ever closer to the seed vault and the treasures within, and the island's inhabitants will need to decide if they can trust each other for long enough to save the seeds and maybe find a path to a new future together.
All right. So, what did we think about this book?
I mostly came away from this book pretty positive. I thought that it started extremely strong. I thought that the book does a very impressive job at establishing a sense of place. I felt like I could wander the shores of Shearwater Island in my mind very easily. I could see the beaches, see the mountain, see just kind of the ocean and how it's omnipresent in that space and inhabit it. I love the characters. I thought the characters were really well wrought. But when it comes to the overall plot and the resolution of the plot, I felt like the ending maybe got a little bit too melodramatic for my liking. What did you think?
I think that's very fair. So first of all, I'm just going to say that as I'm hearing you describe it, I'm just remembering how irresistible the premise of this book was to me when I first heard about it. I think there's something a little gothic about it. I think just idea of this haunted island. So there are, I think, kind of the metaphorical ghosts of the island. We have this relationship between the father of the Salt children, Dominic, who's mourning his wife and is kind of feeling like he's still, communing with her spirit sort of thing. We have Orly, the son, who basically says he can talk to ghosts, or like there's a sad history of like the penguins on the island, for example. There are these like oil drums.
Yeah, the island's history is it wasn't always just like for research and
right.
for
It's very
that
tragic.
kind of stuff. It's a tragic history where the sailors would come and they would basically club the seals and harvest them for their pelts and for their oils and whatnot. And then they would also, when they ran out of seals, they would put living penguins into these oil drums and boil them down for like natural oils and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like unquiet restlessness, and Orly, as you were saying, he thinks he can hear voices and spirits in the wind.
Yeah, so it's such a haunted, atmospheric kind of place. And then the idea of this woman who basically has no reason to be there. It's so remote. There's no explanation for someone just washing up on shore. That's not something that could just happen. So that mystery, I think, is so, like, immediately I wanted to know what was going on with that. But I agree with you that when we get to the end, and you're going to be describing chronologically after this how everything slots into place and the spoilers of everything that happens with the book, but like when I think about that chronologically and I think about all of the things that happen, it is so much. And I think that does lend itself to a certain kind of melodrama, as all of the secrets of what was going on before Rowan washed up on shore. And, like there are all of these things with like the freshly dug graves and the sabotaged radios. Like, I want to know about that. But when I get to the resolution of that, I'm like, okay, it's a lot.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's like a fair criticism in a lot of ways too, now I'm thinking about it, because it is a lot. And it's not as if, the author doesn't signpost that these things are happening. There aren't.
Right,
She's not just kind of throwing things out there randomly and saying, and then this happened. Like, there's evidence for it's happening. I've read the book 2 times now, and I've highlighted it after the second time. I was like, yep, here's the foreshadowing, here's the foreshadowing, here's the foreshadowing. So it's all there, but just as it unfurls, the way that it happens, it's so catastrophic and kind of different from how quiet it's been before.
I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I think it is a well-written book, and it's definitely a quick read. That it's never like slowing down to stuff that feels extraneous. Like, it's definitely, it all feels relevant and important. But I think because you have that initial sort of atmospheric start, when it leaves the more metaphorical kind of world and it gets into the plot of what happened, then all of a sudden I'm thinking, it didn't feel like what I was expecting. And I don't even know if what I was expecting would have worked as a book, but it's such a quick departure that the ending left me kind of thinking, I don't know if I'm satisfied with that, but we're going to talk more about that after we talk about what happened.
Yeah, so if you haven't read the book, this is your chance. I highly recommend that you read it. This is a great read. But why is Rowan here? What is the Salt family hiding? The answer to all of this starts with Rowan and her previously unmentioned husband, Hank, who is a biologist that takes a job managing the Shearwater seed vault after their home burned down in a wildfire, and Rowan told Hank that she wasn't going to have children. This proves to be a challenging assignment for Hank, as he is left in charge of a vault which begins to fail in the face of climate change and the stress of having to sort through and choose which seeds to rescue, with a team that consists of only the Salt family and 3 scientists, 2 brothers, Alex and Tom, as well as a woman named Naja. All this starts to take a really serious toll on his mental health. He also, around this time, enters into a secret relationship with Fen, and then starts having psychotic breaks, during one of which he emails Rowan some frightening cryptic messages, which leads her to actually begin to come to the island when he is unable to respond to her. And the reason why he can't respond to her is because Orly, seeing how manic Hank is becoming, he starts to think, well, if the authorities realized how bad things are here right now, they might just want to evacuate us and say, forget the seeds. And because Orly loves the natural world so much, he doesn't want that to happen, so he breaks their communication equipment. So he's why the radios and that stuff is broken, because he doesn't want the people on the island to say, get us out of here before the job is done. This becomes a bigger issue when Hank kind of goes fully psychotic and tries to drown Fen, is beaten up by Dominic for doing so, and they have to lock him into a side area of the seed vault since they can't contact the authorities to tell them what is going on. He was previously being held in the hospital, and whenever he escaped from it, he would just go to the seed vault and start throwing seeds into the ocean, so they were like, we need to put this guy away. Shortly after they lock him up, though, Naja and Tom die in this freak accident when they're trying to make sure that Raph and Alex are safe, because those two have started seeing each other, at which point Alex blames himself for his brother's death, and he hangs himself, which breaks Raph's heart. And shortly after the Salts bury these bodies and are trying to come to terms with pretty much everything that's gone on in the past couple of weeks, Rowan washes up on shore and starts trying to dig into the mystery of what's going on. She thinks that the family killed Hank at first, but eventually she learns that he's actually just kind of locked up. And that becomes an issue because the vault is now flooding. The vault is flooding, and Hank and the seeds are going to drown. Rowan and Dominic, they kind of rally and attempt to rescue Hank, but they discover that Orly has already let him loose because he was worried that they were going to let him drown. But now that Hank is free, he gets an opportunity to lock Orly up and escape. Rowan has to sacrifice herself to save Orly from drowning. Hank himself drowns after he makes another failed attempt to kill Fen, and they both fall into the sea. But Raph, thankfully, is able to save Fen, and the rescue ship then arrives to evacuate the surviving seeds and personnel, and the Salts leave the island together.
Whew. Yeah, when you lay it out all like that, it's a lot. And it's funny because I actually think the salts are really well adjusted considering when Rowan shows up, they're suspicious of her. But I mean, there's so many traumatic things that I'm like, they actually managed pretty well. Can you imagine though? Because I'm thinking they lived on this island for like 8 years with nothing super eventful happening. And then these past few weeks, like all of a sudden,
yeah, the past couple of months, it's like
terrible.
Boom, 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 boom.
All at once.
It's just a couple of disasters. And also, it's not just them just like living there. It's not a comfortable assignment. The Shearwater Island is based off of, Kathleen, you had said, it's based off of an actual island that the author visited.
So this is really cool. It's based on Macquarie Island, which is the sub-Antarctic island that's halfway between New Zealand and Antarctica. It's part of Tasmania, and Charlotte McConaghy was actually able to visit it for research, along with her 1-year-old son, which I think is wild. So her whole family went. If you look up pictures online, which I really recommend that you do because it's an incredible island, she describes it super vividly in the book. I mean, it is very similar in that sense. The wildlife, the animals, you know, when you read these things about Fen being with the seals and all of this stuff, like that's really what happens on this island. And they do have a research station. And it sounds absolutely incredible. So that stuff is just so cool.
And one of the other things is like you learn how remote this island is. Their contact with the outside world is through their communication equipment, and then every 6 months a supply ship comes by. So they're trying to survive on this island. And when the book starts, when it really starts, and we join the family finding Rowan, I mean they're being battered by storms. They're losing power. They're rationing water and things like that. So this is not only just kind of like a mystery thriller environmental book, it's also there's like some elements of survival in there because the family are trying to continue being able to survive until the point where they're going to get picked up.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a comfortable existence. I think it's very exciting in a terrifying way. Yeah. But you know, I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah. And the thing that I really like about one of the things I really like about the book is that the Salt family, they love the island, and it's killing them. You can see why you would love being this close in communication with nature. Orly, basically, he's 9, and they've been on the island for 8 years, so this is the only home he's ever known.
Yeah.
And he was getting lessons from the scientists. He was getting lessons from Hank about biology, so he's fully keyed into like the natural world and understands how fraught and perilous it all is with the changing climate. They have this great connection with the island, but also the isolation is hurting them. And when Rowan arrives, it's what could be a really destabilizing, like disastrous event of having to take care of this hurt woman who they don't know anything about. It ends up being like having just a little bit of contact with someone else from outside. It kind of cracks open the door and starts like a healing process for the whole family.
Yeah. Well, I think it is really interesting, too, to see that the initial person who really connects with her is Orly. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is just because he's never really met other people. I mean, he is a precocious kind of strange child, and there are these interesting chapters interspersed where it's just Orly narrating, and he's basically talking about seeds in sort of an allegorical way. But, you know, real life seeds that would be in the seed vault for all these interesting kind of unusual plants. And I think, you know, obviously the ending puts it in a certain perspective, but their bond really does develop throughout the story. But Rowan has a different relationship with, you know, I think all of the characters. But it is interesting to see, like, when you live in that kind of isolation, what does that mean when someone shows up? So even though Rowan doesn't trust them and they don't trust Rowan in a sense, I think you don't really have the choice to isolate yourself from anyone. So they become enmeshed pretty immediately. I mean, one, because she's reliant on them because her injuries are so severe. But even after that, I mean, they really only have each other.
Yeah, there's a lot that this book, I think, is saying about the idea of the importance of community in the face of struggle and kind of like existential despair. There's a lot of personal grief that the family members are going through. There's a lot of trauma that they're working through.
Yeah.
And Rowan joining the community and offering what she can offer and the family offering what they can offer and their insights. They do kind of support each other in a way that's really touching and beautiful as the book goes on. There's some excellent writing, some great character moments between Orly and Rowan, between Fen and Rowan. There's a couple like scenes because, I mean, at this point, like, Fen was the only woman on the island at this point. And then Rowan going in there, like, there's a couple scenes in the book where it's like she hasn't talked to a woman since Naja left.
Right.
And there's just some great character moments.
I think it's interesting, too, to have that sense of grief on both the personal scale and then the larger world, the ecological scale of what we're losing. So not only are we seeing the climate change as it's affecting the island, but we are seeing that Rowan herself has a backstory of her dream was to build a house, and she built this wonderful home for herself, and then it was completely destroyed by wildfires. So she is mourning that place and that dream. She's a little prickly when she shows up. So
she thinks they've done something to her husband, so she's on guard at first, and she's also prickly.
I think I'm not being critical. No. I think she has her reasons. But, so she's not really used to being around children, maybe. And the way she speaks to Orly is, she'll just say things where he internalizes that and is pretty horrified because he's like, hey, I'm 9. But she's like, we're all going to die, basically, right? Like, she's looking at this world and she's very pessimistic about it. She's like, we're going to drown, we're going to burn, we're going to starve. I mean, that's what it's heading towards. But then she starts to develop this perspective, like, maybe there aren't a lot of good things about the future that I can look forward to and really think, oh, this is definitely going to happen. But I can live in the present, and I can be surprised occasionally by some things that are still positive, that there are still good things in the world. And one of the scenes that really makes me think of that is the scene with the 2 whales that wash up on
the
shore.
Beach whales. That's a great scene where the Raph is like really into whale song and is very obsessed with kind of listening to it and recording it. And at one point, they discover that while the vault is flooding and the seeds are going to be lost, also a whale and her calf wash up on the beach, and Raph is like, we gotta save them. And Orla's like, oh, but the seeds. And then the family decide, we're gonna try and save these whales. And as you were saying, Rowan, with that pessimism, the entire time she's doing it, she's, even before they finish kind of like preparing to save the whale, she goes to the calf and she apologizes. She's like, I'm sorry, like, you're going to be alone. Like, we're not gonna be able to save your mother.
Yeah.
And then when they do actually manage to save it, there's some great lines where she's thinking, like, I had prepared in my mind for every eventuality but this one.
Yeah.
For where they both live and they both be together. She's like, I never considered that. And she says, like, it changes something in her.
Yeah, I think this book has just a lot to say about, there, especially with this very dramatic landscape and this feeling that, all hope is lost. But I think, with Rowan, like, you really do learn that lesson of, like, there's something useful and there's something important and beautiful in trying, even if failure feels pretty likely.
Yeah.
But there were just, like, lots of scenes like that too, I think, where you see the family and Rowan come together and they're very hopeful, even if they're temporary. I think you still have those kind of moving moments. I really like that scene, even though, it kind of feels reckless and wasteful, that she has the big dinner for them and everyone is just, they have such a wonderful time. And although it's this brief moment, I think certainly very healing for the family who has been traumatized by multiple tragedies, but also for her. It's just a moment to feel human and to feel connected and to feel some hope and that there's goodness in the world.
I think that hope and community and kind of those moments of lightness and of belonging in the face of everything that you feel might be like arrayed against you is important. I know that in an interview with, I think, the American Booksellers Association, the author was talking about how a lot of the books that she writes, they kind of look at wildness both kind of around us and within us through like emotional lenses. And specifically, she highlighted that Wild Dark Shore is about fear, and like the fear of how perilous the world is, fear of the future, fear of what we leave to our children and how we can keep them safe, which I think is, very immediately communicates the book with Dominic and Rowan's ideas about not having children because she's worried about the world they leave behind. But then the author also says that she believes that it's an exploration of how we love in the face of this kind of fear and this kind of loss, And I think, it just comes through so well in this book about how the community and how friendship and clinging to things that we find important and then knowing when and how to let them go is just an important way to kind of live, especially in the face of just extreme trauma and tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think you can look at this book and think, oh, it is going to be depressing, and there are a lot of things that happen in it that are, sad and overwhelming, but that through line really does come through the whole time, I think, of hopefulness and kind of being defiantly hopeful or defiantly community based. Like, it almost makes me think of like when we discussed braiding sweetgrass, and like there are all of these things that have happened to to the earth, to things that you could feel pessimistic about, but throughout that there's also something good.
There are characters that despair in this book. Hank fully submits to his despair.
Yeah.
And he stops caring and in fact starts accelerating it by throwing seeds into the ocean and doing things like that. Rowan starts from a point of believing that there is no hope, and that while she's not perhaps, throwing seeds into the ocean, she's not looking forward to a future for herself. Many times in the book, I think Orly and maybe some of the other children will ask her, like, what do you plan to do when you get off the island? And she's just kind of like, I don't have any plans. Like, there's no point. She comes to a point where through her connection with the family and her experiences with the natural world, she rediscovers that kind of hope where she's like, well, you kind of have to try something. Even if it doesn't work. The seed vault on the island fails. Like, it's gone.
Yeah.
But they continue. They leave.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the thing, is you do what you can. So they have not, a perfect contingency plan, but they save as many seeds as they can. And so I think, it's not a total failure. There's always there's always trying, I think, which is great. And I do like, as you mentioned, just the contrast between, Hank and Rowan and the children. Like, there are multiple perspectives in this book. Literally, there are chapters that are narrated by different characters. But I think it is great to just see the different ways that you can approach, especially like a world like this, like the different ways that this is conceptualized with these characters and get something out of it. Maybe Hank's perspective is not super helpful, but I do sometimes feel resistant to those multiple perspectives. I think, is it jumping around too much? But it is nice to get those different thoughts on something that is so complex to really think about, because it's so big. It's the enormity of it. But it does make me think, as you're mentioning this, of Rowan having hope for the future. One of the reasons why I don't like the ending so much. Is it too early to get to that?
No, I think we should address it.
Okay. So, as you mentioned in your synopsis, Rowan basically sacrifices her life for Orly. They are both trapped in the flooding room where Hank was kept. Hank escapes, but then he traps Orly in there, and then Rowan goes to save him. And the waters are rising too fast, and Dom is not fast enough to open it because it's like rusted shut.
It's rusted shut, yeah.
And so he, I think, is able to have like a little opening that like one person can breathe through, sort of thing. And then she decides that's got to be for Orly, and this is it for me. Mm-hmm. And
it's a poignant moment. It's a lot, but I mean, there's certainly, again, it is a lot, but there is reasoning behind why she would make that choice. You learn part of Rowan's backstory is also she grew up on a boat, like a houseboat, and she was watching her other siblings. Her parents, they lost their home, and they didn't tell the kids that. Rowan's, I think, youngest brother, while she was supposed to be watching the kids, and she was trying to, but she's young when she was doing it, he falls off the boat and drowns. So she, you can view this as, by saving Orly, she's kind of saving River, who is her youngest brother. She's kind of saving River in like metaphorical, like she's atoning for that, even though she doesn't blame herself anymore for it. It's like kind of like this time I've done it correctly, and she like also like hallucinates or sees like the kid's mom while she's drowning also.
I think so, yeah.
It gets a little as she's drowning, the book gets a little the reality, you're not sure what's real or not as she's dying. But I don't know if she had to die. I don't know if she had to die to make the story work.
Yeah, it just really bugged me. That was one of the moments, the throw the book across the room kind of moment where you're like, come on. And
I wasn't happy with it.
Yeah, it really bothers me because, and this is true, and I mean, it is true to the character, and I'm not saying, but I feel like if I were Rowan's therapist or something, like I would be like, look, it was never your fault. I mean, I feel very bad for Rowan, who has carried so much guilt for something that, first of all, she was a kid being responsible for her two sisters and her brother.
Yeah.
Like, it was too much to put on her in the first place, and then so her brother dies, and then she feels that guilt. You don't have to make up for that by saving another kid. Like, none of that is on you. I feel like she still needs to work past that, and that's why. But I'm like, come on, you don't need to do that.
I think it also just because so much happens in the final chapters of this book. The fact that Rowan also dies during it.
Yeah.
I felt put out by it, and to be fair, I can see how it makes sense. It does make sense with the theming of the book as well. Like, sometimes you help and sometimes it goes well. You save the whales. Sometimes you help and something is lost.
Yeah.
There's Rowan tells Orly about how when her house burned down,
mm-hmm.
she was looking in the woods nearby and she found out that some wombats had saved a bunch of other animals, which is like a thing that they sometimes do when there's disasters, when there's wildfires. That's a thing they do. Orly, at the end of the book, talking, I believe, to Rowan posthumously, talks about kelp forests mm-hmm. around the island, saying that there aren't really any trees on the island, but underwater there's these huge forests of kelp, and during these big storms and things like that, all the animals that can will go and they'll hide in the kelp and they'll survive without us. We're not needed to help them. They don't need humanity to save them from everything. Sometimes they can save themselves. So there's hope, and there's that bittersweet sadness and the bitter truth of sometimes it will require sacrifice, but also let her live.
I know it's written. It's written very poignantly, and I think it does certainly try to put it in a perspective where you feel a little bit better about it. But I'm like, couldn't take turns breathing. I have like all of these like scenarios. I'm like, did it have to happen? And one of the things that feels a little strange too is that Orly's mother dies giving birth to him. I just have this feeling of like, how many... You're not going to let me say this, how many women have to die for Orly?
I'll let you say
it. I do get a little uncomfortable with, I think, some of the ways that women are expected to sacrifice more mm-hmm. in this book at times. And so, like someone like Fen even... I mean, she goes through so much, and at the end, she is saved by her brother. But the first time that Hank is trying to drown her, I mean, she saves herself.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's so much pressure put on, like, and I know that Orly, bless him, he doesn't have. I mean, we're talking about he grew up on this island. That's all he's known. He doesn't have street smarts.
No.
He doesn't know other people. Literally, he's not met many people. So I think he does need to be protected in a way. But I think just because it's him both times, it feels a little bit like too much.
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from with that. I do.
I like Orly. I have to say that too.
Yeah.
I like him.
No, I understand
He's a nice kid.
I understand where you're coming from with that. I think that the way that the woman in Orly's life have sacrificed themselves for him, it can come across as a little kind of it just doesn't sit right with me. The book justifies it, I think, perfectly fine. But when I came away from it, I felt like that it was a little much to have Rowan also die at the end of this.
And they don't have to live happily ever after. I am a little concerned for the family, in fact, because they have like 4 bodies on the island. Like, I don't think they're going to have an easy trip back.
No.
Explaining that.
No, they're gonna be sitting in depositions for the next couple months. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was never probably going to be a very happy ending, but it almost feels like, is it just that a thriller dictates that someone you care about must die? Like, I just I guess at the end of the day, I just wanted to see her live.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just me.
I mean, the book made you care about her.
Right, so that's a great,
Yep. So,
that's a great job.
But
we're mad too.
Yeah, we're mad about it. But I mean, again, just kind of like to kind of reflect a little bit about it. I mean, the nature and wildlife writing in this is incredible. You really are transported to this island. You can see the majesty of these animals, and you feel that experience of communing with nature in like extreme environments. Like that's great. I loved the idea of like hope and facing the idea of climate disaster and despair in all sorts of different ways. The idea of community being a way to push back against that and to find hope and new paths forward, even if they're not the paths that you thought you would have taken. This book does so many things so well, and it's just such an engaging read. I was never bored with it. I was never like, oh, there's too much nature stuff, or I don't want to learn about how this cool pitcher plant works or something like that. I was always happy to be reading it, even in the parts of it where the more thriller parts of it where I was kind of hoping to tap the brakes a little bit. I enjoyed my time with this book quite a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's very enjoyable. I do think it sounds like it probably was a harrowing journey for her, but I absolutely think it was the right choice for Charlotte McConaghy to go to Macquarie Island, because she captures this landscape incredibly well. It's funny because it sounds very scary, but it is also very beautiful. So just having a book that transports you to somewhere so unique and so memorable, I loved reading all of that. I do feel like I took away some really interesting facts about those seeds. I mean, that like everything is really interesting, and it's a very quick read because you just can't wait to learn more.
Yeah.
So James, do you have a quote for us that you wanted to share?
I do, and actually it is related to an event that you talked about, which was when Rowan kind of throws a dinner party with using a bunch of supplies that she really shouldn't be. It is a quote where after they go have dinner, they go outside and they start to dance and kind of celebrate just the fact that they're together and they're happy. And let me just read the quote here. So the quote is, Rowan, watching Dominic and his family dancing, I close my eyes, drinking it all in, knowing it is a place and time that I will never forget. The world is dangerous and we will not survive it. But there is this, impermanent as it may be.
I think that captures, so much of just the theme, what the message of the book is. And
the moment itself, just these characters happy.
Yeah.
Dominic is not consumed with thoughts of his wife. He's dancing with his daughter, Fen, who he's kind of estranged with because of just how he's so worried about her, and she's so worried that he thinks that she's broken because of what happened with Hank. Orly, everyone just kind of having fun and dancing, and she's just seeing it and being like, I'll remember this.
Yeah.
Even though it's not going to last forever.
Yeah. So there are these brief moments, where I think everyone has peace, and it's really nice. And it shows the very lyrical, the very, literary, beautiful writing.
And it's also the world, too, right? Like, the beauty of the world, of your life. There's, those moments where you stop and you just kind of appreciate, like, this is it. Like, I know this can't be forever. I'm not going to be here forever, or this isn't going to be here forever, but, it's incredible.
All right. Are you ready for read-alikes?
Yes. So finding read-alikes for this, kind of tricky because it does so many kind of unique things so well, but there's a couple that I have in mind. The first one is The Light Pirate by Lily Brooks Dalton. This is for people looking for a book that hits geographically a little closer to home, especially if you like books about climate change with great characters and beautiful writing. It follows a character named Wanda from her childhood to the end of her life as she grows up in a Florida that is being consumed by hurricanes and floods from climate change. It turns the state from a place that is industrialized and can host kind of just our modern civilization to something that is beyond and new, different, because you just can't support it anymore. Services are being yanked and destroyed. They can't keep the power on. And it's just following the consumption of an American state by climate change, like a post-climate Florida, post-apocalyptic sort of, but it's incredibly written. And then when it comes to kind of the post-civilized, quote-unquote, Florida, it's just this devastating, speculative, like fiction look at a future of what that might look like. I really loved it. It's a great book. And then for my second one is, if you are a reader who read this book and your first thought is, I simply must read more by this author that is kind of like this, you're in luck. Charlotte McConaghy also wrote a book, Once There Were Wolves. This is kind of like environmental mystery and thrillers. The book's it follows Inti Flynn. She was a woman who arrives in Scotland with a team of biologists with the goal to reintroduce the grey wolf to that area. Those efforts are complicated when a farmer is found dead, and the wolves are the perfect scapegoat for something that might just be a human person's attempt at getting away with murder. She runs into another problem when she realizes that she might be falling for the prime suspect. So if you're looking for those environmental themes, that kind of mystery, deep character development, and a little bit of romance, I would recommend Once There Were Wolves.
Yeah, those both sound very good. All right, so I had two books I wanted to recommend as well. And actually the first one I did recommend a few years back for a summer reading episode. I just love this book so much, and I did think about it a lot while I was reading this. It's Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang. And one of the things that really had me thinking about it in particular was the seed vault is such a big part of this book. And in Land of Milk and Honey, there is a lot of talk of preservation as well, the things that get saved, so seeds or animals or things like that. Because again, this is a future climate disaster. So very similar in that, they're in a remote location. But in this one, there's a chef who's escaping her dying career in this city that has been taken over by smog. Basically, the whole world is taken over by this smog, and there's all this food scarcity. It's really a dire time, but there's kind of this magical place, at the top of a mountain, I think it's in Italy, where all of these rich people have gathered, basically, and she's allowed to be a chef, basically the chef of her wildest dreams. She has access to every ingredient. She can do whatever she wants, but of course, in this rarefied world, it's kind of ethically not great. She has some reservations about that, and she's not really sure why she's been brought there. There's some mystery, there's a lot of great food writing, and there's, just a lot to think about with when we have these climate disasters. What does the world look like? What do people owe to the world? What kinds of things will happen? And I just thought the writing was so incredible, and it's such an amazing story. So I wholeheartedly recommend that one if you have not checked it out yet. Second one I wanted to recommend, this one is actually set in the past. So this is a different direction. This is historical fiction, Isola by Allegra Goodman. This came out within the past year. And I chose this one if you like the island, basically, and this idea of being somewhere very remote and having to survive. So in this one, it starts out, Marguerite is this heir to a fortune. She's supposed to have this, prosperous life, but then she's orphaned. And her guardian spends her inheritance, and then she has to go on this expedition with him. While they're on their trip, en route to that, she befriends her guardian servant, and they kind of develop this relationship. And when it's discovered, they're punished by being abandoned on a small island where there's no hope for rescue. They're stuck there. And, it's quite a harrowing experience. This island is, much like the island in Wild Dark Shore, Shearwater, it's not very welcoming. It's cold. It's not a lot to sustain them. So there's not food and things like that for them. So she has to abandon that life of privilege and really become someone who can survive in this dire situation. So if you like the survival element and want a story that is very engrossing, but also, quite intense, I would recommend that one.
All right, that sounds actually really good. But what else sounds very good is the book that we are going to be reading next, which also happens to be the Lit Lunch selection for this year, which is Northwoods by Daniel Mason. Northwoods is a sweeping novel about a single house in the woods of New England, told through the lives of those who inhabit it across the centuries. This includes a pair of young lovers who are escaping from a Puritan colony, an English soldier who abandons the battlefield and decides to devote himself to apples, a lovelorn painter, a conman, and a stalking panther, among others. I believe there's beetles at some point in this book.
Yeah, there are a lot of perspectives.
So it's a book that is about cycles of history, about nature, even about literature. Northwoods is a book that talks about the ways that you're connected to the environment and how we connect to it and to one another across time, language, and space. It's written along with the seasons and divided into the 12 months of the year, making it an unforgettable novel about secrets and fate and the idea of how we live on even after we're gone.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. I think, just the structure of it, that format is going to be really interesting to talk about. And I think it should be a good time. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to our first episode of Season 7. We'll be back next month. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.